Okay, so this is my government federalism project, and as you can see in the bottom left, I included a little bit of marble cake, and in the bottom right, I included some layer cake to show the different types of federalism. Okay, so why is gun control such a controversial issue in the United States? So the gun control is so controversial because there have been a ridiculous amount of mass shootings in the United States, uh, like Sandy Hook, Las Vegas shooting, Orlando nightclub shooting, and Virginia Tech shooting, or just to name a few. And that's only like four. And there have been so many more. There seems to be a never-ending flow of mass shootings in the United States. So the United States has the highest number of guns to people in the world. There's about 120.5 guns for every 100 people in the United States, which, if I'm not mistaken, is like twice as high as the next highest. So, as you can see, this leads to a lot of controversy over whether or not guns should be legal in the United States and who should control the guns in the United States. Okay, so what do the states think? What's the states' perspective? The states think that they should have the power over gun control because of the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment states that all powers not delegated to the federal government are delegated to the states or to the people. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say exactly who is going to control gun laws. So the states think that they should have the power to do this. So what is the federal perspective? So Congress believes that they can pass laws concerning guns because under the Supremacy Clause, the federal government's laws take precedent over the state's laws. So I just want to show the Supremacy Clause, otherwise known as the Linchpin Clause, because it basically holds the entire Constitution together. It just, without it, there would just be mayhem because there would be no like final say. So the federal government also has the right to overrule states' laws, and this has been seen in cases like McDonald versus Chicago, but we'll get there later in the presentation. Okay. So, thesis. Move my head out of the way. It always does this. Federal government should have the power on gun laws. I'm just going to read this one straight off my notes. The federal government should have the power to create gun laws because of the Supremacy Clause, the Due Process Clause, and the Commerce Clause. So the Second Amendment must be upheld, so the federal government does this through the Supremacy Clause and the Due Process Clause. The Commerce Clause regards economic activity, and guns absolutely affect economic activity in states. Okay, so the first one, gun violence costs money, lots of money, and this has to do with the Commerce Clause. So Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution is known as the Commerce Clause, and it basically states that the federal government has the power to regulate commerce among the states. So gun violence has been shown by a study that I linked below to have a huge economic within states. In fact, it costs the states about $269 billion every year. So this means that it has a huge effect on interstate commerce, which means it falls under the Commerce Clause, which gives the federal government the right to regulate guns. Next slide. Okay, so this is a nice little Game of Thrones reference. Federal government must protect the Second Amendment, and then we have two Supreme Court cases. So we got D.C. versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago. So this has to do with the Supremacy Clause, if you can see the image. So the Second Amendment must be upheld, so the federal government does this through the Supremacy Clause and through the Due Process Clause. The Second Amendment states that all citizens of the United States have the right to bear arms, and this shall not be infringed. And this is traditionally been interpreted as the right to have guns. So in DC versus Heller, Washington, D.C. Denied Dick Heller's request to have a concealed firearm. So Dick Heller sued to the Supreme Court, and the majority decision of the Supreme Court was that it was a violation of Dick Heller's Second Amendment rights to not be granted his concealed firearm. So the Supremacy Clause allows for this because the federal government has the final say and precedent over constitutional law matters. Then there was some argument over whether DC and Heller should apply to the states because technically Washington, D.C. isn't a state. So McDonald's versus Chicago, it was the same situation, concealed gun permit denied. Then the Supreme Court ruled again that it was a breach of the Second Amendment. And this time, though, the majority decision added on that the 14th Amendment's due process clause prevents states from taking away gun rights. So these two cases show that the federal government has the final say in deciding gun rights under the Supremacy Clause and the Due Process Clause. Okay, so federal government, positives and negatives to this. So positives, more federal gun control has been shown to reduce gun deaths. And this is only a positive if there is more federal gun control, but less deaths is usually a positive. Enacting federal safety standards like federal regulations on an actual safety on a firearm that has been shown to reduce the number of accidental gun deaths. And federal standards allows for states to have the same laws, which all states have the same laws, which would reduce illegal transfers across state borders, which mean that all of the guns in the United States could be tracked more accurately, which would allow for better tracking and murders and homicides with stolen guns. So negatives, lots of the federal gun control positives could just be introduced into the states if they wanted them. And people have different opinions in different states. So someone living in Montana would be living under California law, which could be the tyranny of the majority. We'll get there. Basically, the reason I put the image of a hunter is to show that, like, if there were federal gun laws, this hunter might not be able to get his gun where he really needs it, and kind of more like a rural state. Okay, so expressed or reserved powers. So the expressed powers connect to gun control because there is no specific law stating how the federal government should regulate guns. This means that gun control technically isn't an express power. There is a strong argument for the states having guns because it was not specified how the federal government should regulate guns in the Constitution. This means that it would fall under the reserved powers, or state powers, which belong to the states. 10th Amendment. This transitions nicely into my rebuttal, or the state's case for having control over gun laws. Okay, so what is the state's case? It isn't specified in the Constitution who should regulate guns, which means that falls under the 10th Amendment because all powers not specifically vested in the national government goes to the states or the people. So, United States versus Lopez. As we study this in class, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional for the federal government to regulate guns in schools using the Commerce Clause. They ruled that guns in schools did not have a significant effect on interstate commerce. If a state is able to prove that guns didn't have a significant effect on interstate commerce as a whole, and not just in schools, they could say that the Commerce Clause doesn't apply, which would get rid of it and give the states more gun rights. And then we have there's like the people within a state. They should get their own say on the issues within their own states. So if the federal government takes control, then there could be tyranny of the majority. So this would occur because the federal government's policies are enacted by senators, and there are more senators from states with more people. So this means like people, like back to what I said, people in California would have more pull than states like Montana. So on the federal stage, California would essentially be making gun laws for Montana, which wouldn't cater to the people in the state. Okay, so state government positives and negatives. So positives, each state can have their own gun laws, and that this is based off of what the people in that state want. This avoids tyranny of the majority. And then we're avoiding federal government having more control over the states. So this is kind of, that's opinion based. You might want the federal government to have more control, and you might not. But basically, I want to talk about this image. It was the most gun-friendly states, and as you can see, each state is different, and each state has their own wants. And with a vast federal gun regulation, each state might not be able to get their own wants. Okay, negatives. Guns from non-restrictive states can end up in restrictive states, which causes problems. So Iron Highway, look it up. It's basically like guns from Georgia go to Chicago, different gun laws. It causes problems when there are different gun laws. Full faith and credit clause could also be affected because it would be hard for states to honor guns that are legal in one state and illegal in another. And there isn't a nationwide standard, which can lead to discrepancies in gray areas, which is a negative. So what is my recommendation? So I can't speak in the I no first person. I can't say I. So I'll try my best. I said I, but okay. The best course of action would be to set up federal standard gun laws and safety precautions. So these gun laws must uphold the Second Amendment, or else they will be ruled unconstitutional. So to show that the federal gun laws uphold the Second Amendment, they should be based on previous Supreme Court cases that upheld the Second Amendment. These federal gun laws should also take into account how bad too many guns is for the economy, so guns should definitely be restricted in some ways. Federal safety precautions like mandatory safeties on firearms have been proven to reduce firearm deaths, so that should be included in the federal restrictions. The other thing that has been proven to reduce gun deaths is reducing guns. So if the federal government could reduce guns by reducing the amount of guns that are made, this would in turn reduce the amount of guns and reduce the amount of gun deaths. This wouldn't be unconstitutional, though, because they're not taking guns away from the people directly. They're taking it away, they're just stopping making guns. So if this is why I have the education thing, if there was as much gun safety education in owning a firearm as there was in obtaining your driver's license, I'm sure there would be it would be a lot better. There would be more gun safety and things would be safer. This also has to do with why I have the gun safe, and the top right is like a trigger lock for a handgun. Thank you. Hopefully I can stop sharing. Oh my God.